I'm Matt Landau, and this is Unlocked, Season 6, Magic Zones. This episode's brought to you by Point Central, the leaders in smart home automation, the company that we suggest for growing vacation rental managers of all shapes and sizes. And Breezeway, the industry's top property care and operations platform. It is more crucial post-COVID than ever before. Today's conversation is with Kirsten King, and it's a very unique kind of interview because after creating and building a supremely profitable and sustainable property management company in Big Sky, Montana, Kirsten just sold her business. She has come full circle. Looking back over decades of vacation rental operation, Kirsten reflects on the things that she did right, what she would have done differently, and some of those pivotal moments that resulted in huge leaps of personal and business development. Let's get into it. Kirsten King.
Hello, I'm here.
You're there. Woohoo. First of all, hello.
Hi, Matt.
How are you?
I'm great. It's a gorgeous day in Big Sky.
That is Big Sky, Montana, for those who don't know Big Sky. And I am embarrassed to say that I have never been to Montana. So give us an idea of what Big Sky is like in the big main seasons there. Just paint a picture for me.
So probably one of the prettiest places in the United States. Of course, I'm a little biased, but we're a tiny rural mountain community, destination ski resort, Big Sky Resort, located in the southwest corner of Montana. We're also known as a gateway to Yellowstone National Park. We're the midway point between Bozeman, Montana, and Yellowstone, the west entrance of Yellowstone going through the town of West Yellowstone. So exactly located midway between those 2 points. So in the summer, we're a mecca of whitewater rafting, zip lining, exploring Yellowstone National Park, wildlife viewing, hiking, everything you could think of in terms of outdoor pursuits. And in the winter, we are mainly known as a destination ski resort with about 6,000 skiable acres and 80 kilometers of groomed Nordic trails.
So basically you're saying there's not a lot to do around there.
No, you'd be super bored if you come here. You probably should just skip it.
Does everybody who lives in town, are they active, outdoorsy people?
Well, I often say that if you are coming here to shop, you will be sorely disappointed. So I would say that the majority of people here are very active, love the outdoors, and find ways to enjoy every season here in Big Sky. 2 days ago, I just went on a Nordic ski backcountry with 2 girlfriends and our dogs, about 10 miles round trip. And I think we saw 3 other people. So there's still ways to get off the beaten path here.
Wow, I love the sound of that. I feel like we've been in the same orbit now for many years. When did you start? When did you join LiveRes, for instance?
Yeah, that was back in 2013. So definitely that is true. I have been a fan of yours for some time and definitely have circled in some of the same spaces with you.
And you were at some of those early LiveRes partner conferences, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I went to all of them.
And what number partner were you?
Ooh, I think 642.
Okay. And for those who are not LiveRes alumni, LiveRes did a really cool thing in which they literally numbered in order their partners and made really beautiful sort of plaques each year for your number, right?
Correct. And some of my greatest colleagues in the industry came out of relationships from different advisory boards and events that I participated in. So I'm grateful for those connections over the years.
I am very much as well. I would say the exact same thing. I even have a nameplate. I came to speak at a LiveRes conference, and I don't know if that particular number was like a misprint or something, but I got a plaque. I felt very honored. I know that you and your husband were not trained and you were not planning necessarily to become vacation rental virtuosos. And I'd like to hear a little bit about this backstory of both of you because it sounds like you both had very unconventional and impressive careers prior to this kind of moment that you decided a change was necessary. Walk us up to that crisis point.
Well, impressive might be a stretch in my world, but prior to coming to Big Sky in 2008, my husband and I lived in Minneapolis, Minnesota. That's where we met. I had a background in education and subsequently went in to be a development director for a nonprofit that focused on character education. My husband was a golf pro at a high-end country club, starting in Minneapolis and becoming the head pro at a club in St. Paul, Minnesota. And really, I think back in 2005, perhaps, we drove the entire state of Montana as an anniversary trip and fell in love with just the geography and the people that we met and the places we visited. We had kind of a dream of going to Montana. And ultimately, through several conversations, we kind of had a midlife crisis, and fortunately together, but just looked at each other and said, is this it? We have got 20 more years of doing what we're doing. I mean, we had a house in the suburbs, 3 kids. I drove a minivan, the typical story, right? Soccer mom. And he was working 1,000,000 hours a week. And we just really had a desire to recreate ourselves and reinvent ourselves. So we sold our house, we quit our jobs, and we took off for Big Sky because we had decided that other places we looked in Montana were interesting, but that it was going to be just too easy to recreate our lives and slide back into those same patterns. So we picked this tiny town of 3,000 people
Mm.
and started over. In the meantime, he had started a company, a startup company, and I had gotten a real estate license, was working for a real estate firm in Big Sky and getting to know some of the agents. But of course, now fast forward, this is 2008, and we all know that things are starting to go a little sideways with the economy. We had gotten lucky and sold our house just in the nick of time, and that was going to be our money to live on. My husband had this startup, and it was starting to go poorly. Um, so the motivation was getting there for me. It was starting to feel a little scary. And that leads kind of into when I've thought about this talk today, the lessons that I would share with others. Lesson 1 was desperation is a good motivator. And for us, we were living in the condo that we had purchased back in 2006, just as a vacation place. We had no intention really of renting it when we bought it. But we got out here and moved into it, and it was really small for 3 kids and 2 adults. And so we set out to find a larger rental in the community and looked at each other and said, now what are we going to do with this? It's costing us a lot of money to hold on to this. We didn't want to destroy our credit and turn it back over to the bank. So we decided to try our hand at vacation rentals. And that was really the genesis of Big Sky Vacation Rentals.
The famous last words. We decided to try our hand at vacation rentals.
Exactly. So, as you mentioned, we had no formal training, no experience. I did have a real estate license in Minnesota, but honestly, we were just rehabbing properties for ourselves and then selling them. So, certainly no experience in the arena of vacation rentals.
And before we move on, I'm curious, at what point, like, did you finally make that decision that that's it, we're going to make a change? Because I know for a lot of people, you can feel a thorn in your side and it's annoying, but it's not annoying enough to actually pull the trigger and do something. In looking back, is there any moment that you recognize as the turning point or any trick that you played on yourself to nudge you into it?
I think it's that I've never been okay with mediocrity. I'm going to struggle to say the word, but it just seemed like our life was in this pattern and it wasn't very inspiring. And my husband was not satisfied at all with going to work at 5 a.m. and coming home at 8 or 9 at night and, seeing his kids sleeping in their cribs when he left and back in bed when he got home. And just that desire to do something different and to have a lifestyle that allowed us to spend time with our kids and, be out of a city environment. So I think it just got uncomfortable enough that we pushed ourselves to leave that environment and try something new.
I like that. And in my case, like the several personal leaps that I've made in my life, it ultimately, like, it's a feeling that's kind of mounting, and that way that you described mediocrity, if that's the right pronunciation. It was also a similar thing for me. And in the end, I just like pulled the trigger. I was like, that's it. I'm making a change. I'm doing something. It's going to be difficult. I don't want it to be easy, but there's no looking back. And I'm pretty respectful of my decision in that sense. And I think sometimes just pulling the trigger like that forces you into a new stage in a way.
Yeah, and it's super scary, Matt. I know you did something similar. And honestly, people thought we were crazy. We had good jobs, we had a nice house, we had everything that a lot of people would say were measures of success, right or wrong. Um, and so to leave a situation like that, to take a risk without actually knowing what was going to happen in the end, looking back, yeah, it seems like it was a risky move, but I think that there seems to be a lot of people in this community that did things like that, and it's inspiring to me that people were willing to leave something to, look for something else that was better.
I love that. Real quick, did you just casually, like, not even mention the fact that you wanted to be a Broadway performer?
Yes, and I skipped that. It's in my bio on our website. If anyone's ever read that, but I said had secret dreams of being a Broadway star that didn't pan out. So I ended up in the world of vacation rentals.
We accept all alternate career paths. Kirsten, this is going to be a very different kind of interview than we've ever done on the Unlocked podcast, because you have started your vacation rental business, and we're going to talk about how it actually began and how you grew. But you have also exited your business in the sense that you are no longer the owner, right?
That's correct. In December of just this past year, 2020, we did make a decision to sell our company.
So this is really cool perspective, I think, to have for anybody who's currently in the industry and is maybe thinking about selling at some point. Or if you're just getting started, I think listening to Kirsten's hindsight gives you 2020. And I was trying to think of an example of what this might feel like. And the closest I could come was when a university has graduation and they invite a speaker who went to that school typically and who has gone on to achieve great things and who shares wisdom. And it really, really resonates with all the people in the audience if it's a good speech, because you have seen it all. You've gone through each of the steps and you are officially you have moved into that next stage. So bringing people back up to date with the starting of your business, do we think that some kind of Genesis story, some kind of crafted narrative like what you described, is necessary for a successful independent vacation rental manager?
Yeah, I think that, to me, it was more there has to be a why behind what you're doing. And maybe initially I didn't understand that because I told you it, honestly started a little accidentally. And in that first year, we rented 250 nights in that 2-bedroom condo in a market that literally has 180 nights of good rental. And really, that came from pouring myself into it and really looking at that guest experience and how could we create something for people that was super special, even though the condo we were renting was $99 a night during the summer, and I think the max rate was about 175 over the holidays. And we really set out to just make that experience something unique for the people that were visiting Montana, and most of them for the first time. And so I do think, looking back, that deciding, what your reason for doing it is very important.
I like that a lot. And I always see this, like, what's your why? I always see that. And I don't know why, but it just like makes me stop thinking for a moment, because it seems esoteric. I understand exactly what whoever invented that phrase is trying to say. But oftentimes when I talk to owners and managers, they have one of these reasons, whether they have articulated it or not. And it really is just sitting down and asking yourself, quite literally, why are we doing this at the end of the day? Is that the simple process of creating a mission statement, for instance?
Yeah, but I mean, in my case at this point, because remember, we're back in 2009 at this point, really my why was I need to create an income for our family or I'm going to be living in our camper. I wish I could say it was some glorious reason that had
Visionary.
it was just a pure and simple need. The economy was terrible and no one was buying real estate. And if I didn't figure out how to do something with this property, I was going to give it to the bank. So my why was pretty simple at the time. It doesn't, it's nice to have something really grand and virtuous, but in my case, it was pretty simple.
And it can change too, right? It could change like from year to year or decade to decade.
Yes, it definitely evolved over time.
And what was the why by the time you sold?
That really goes into kind of the last thing I was going to touch on in lesson, 5 in my mind as I was going to close out, which is really about being the best at what you're doing and treating owners and guests vacations like they're your own. Our mission became to create extraordinary vacation experiences for our owners and guests. And, that's not a very profound mission. And I'm sure thousands of other VRMs have something similar. But for us, the secret sauce became the execution. Something that can sound pretty simple is often really complex and difficult to pull off on a large scale. So, what I started back in 2009 with only a single property and could really execute perfectly every single time. By the time we got to 2020 and had 130 luxury properties under management
Wow.
with 30,000 visitors a year, the actual ability to pull that off on that scale became an immense challenge and something, there was nothing more important than treating our owners and guests' vacations like they were our own. And so I think I always had that at the core of who I was in the beginning, but it developed into much more of a company-wide mission as time went on.
And that's something that the smaller you are, the easier it is for you to execute, right? That it gets tricky as you try to scale this thing.
Absolutely. It was the hardest thing that we did over these 11 years was the scalability of the business. In 2009, I had 4 properties and I really wasn't too picky. I'm not going to lie about what I was taking. I was flattered that local real estate agents thought I was doing a good job.
Yeah. So how'd that happen? Were they just coming to you completely organically, word of mouth?
Yeah, I had because I started with a real estate company when I first moved here. I had developed some relationships and I was putting in those long work weeks even though I was getting no result, frankly. But I did get to know people and they were hearing my story of my own singular vacation rental that I was just doing on my own. And they had clients that were pretty desperate for funds that were in over their heads as well. It was kind of the perfect storm of opportunity because I really was an unknown and I was coming into a market without a lot of experience, but people were willing to give me a chance because they could see how hard I was working.
And were there other managers in town?
At the time, the resort was probably the biggest management company. There were definitely some other small companies doing vacation rentals, but the world of the internet, as far as vacation rentals went, was fairly new. People were used to running vacation rental companies with just people calling on the phone to book reservations and literally, brochures of properties that were under management and just really old school ways of doing things. And I didn't know how to do that, so I never even attempted it. I went straight to the internet.
Okay. So not to knock brochures because they still have their place, but you jumped straight into the digital side of it. And in those early days, there was, I'm guessing, HomeAway and VRBO in their early clunky versions. But that was before Airbnb, right?
It was before Airbnb. And so, yes, I stumbled at the time, I stumbled onto VRBO and decided to list, on that OTA. It was the only one I was aware of at the time. And so it was very, I got a web page up and started, working it from those angles, but really was pretty limited in the ways that I could reach people outside of those two things.
And I love this sort of requirement to be the best. And I'd like to move on to another component of your success in just a moment. But on that OTA topic, looking back, what's the big thing that you've learned about the relationship that a vacation rental manager has with a listing site?
Well, over time, in the early years, I was dependent on those first few properties being on those sites because I didn't have a brand and I was just myself, right? Kirsten King as a property manager. I didn't even have, I think until end of 2009, I didn't even have a company name. Um, now we're still very proud that we're under, I would say right now about 25%. Last month it was only 14% of our bookings came from OTAs, but we have worked very hard over the years to garner direct bookings and build our brand and our presence on the internet that people could find us outside of OTAs. And it's definitely been a competitive advantage and something that I've been able to use in my presentations and my discussions with potential owners have been just how, in my personal opinion, how dangerous overdependence can be on OTAs and why have working with a company that really works hard on direct bookings is so important.
And you're speaking my language. I think listing site independence were the first words that came out of my vacation rental mouth in the early days.
Yes, I'm pretty sure I stole those from you, Matt.
Well, I actually stole them from another Inner Circle member, Kim Bergstrom. So shout out to Kim. But this thing that you just mentioned, and you keep jumping into little topics that I'm really curious about. So I'm not going to get sidetracked, but I am going to address them. When you go into conversations with prospective homeowners, let's say in these days, when you're acquiring more and more properties, and I did a little research, I asked some of your longer standing colleagues, one of whom, Miss Tina Upson from LiveRes, who knows you fairly well. She said, the thing that impresses me most about Kirsten is that she has this incredibly positive attitude, but when she goes into a room, she commands it. She communicates extremely effectively. And I'm curious, like, what do you do? What's the secret there? How do you communicate with people so effectively, like homeowners, for instance? Is it more than just speaking the truth?
That's a great question. I think I have to kind of back up a little bit to a lesson that it was about finding your differentiator and who you are. This is lesson 2. So I
Okay, I still have that one on my list, by the way.
yeah, and so I touched on it a little bit, and the two things tie together because I touched on it a little bit in the beginning. I wasn't picky, right? Because I was taking what came to me. I was still trying to figure myself out. I learned really, really quickly, like within the first 6 months, that whether a property produced $25,000 in gross rents or whether it was going to produce $80,000 in gross rents, I was going to do a similar amount of work. And so that was a pretty big aha moment for me that came quickly, that I needed a set of filters for what I was looking for in an owner. So now fast forward to your question about commanding a room and my discussions with the owners. I always felt that it was a mutual two-way street and that I was there to make a decision about whether this was the right property and the right homeowner for me, not just are they going to choose me. And I would say for the majority of the times that I have been in an interview type situation, I haven't really seen it that way. For me, it's been, am I going to choose this particular property and homeowner? And, I had really 4 things for me that were my filters for that. The first one was ease of relationship. And did I think we were a mutually good fit? Did I like the person? Did I want to work with them? Secondly, would the property produce a certain amount of gross income? So of course, that's different in every market. But once I established a baseline here in Big Sky, I really focused on properties that met the threshold for that baseline. Three, I looked for properties that had low owner usage, because obviously that goes without saying, but high owner usage is not always ideal for producing income. And lastly, I had very specific geographic targets, because I knew that the cost of operations, I learned pretty quickly, even when operations meant just me, that I only had so much time. And that if I picked a property in one location and then I chose a property that was 45 minutes away, that I couldn't be nearly as efficient. And so even today, that is, these principles guide those conversations and um, help us in deciding which properties and which owners are best for the portfolio and for the, and for the brand. So did I answer your question on that?
Yeah, you did, and you opened up a whole new bunch of cans of worms that I'm gonna go into in just a second. What I heard is kind of like a combination of just a comprehensive understanding of what you want for yourself, like what your business needs best, and that's a very pragmatic decision, and then just a confidence when you're going into these conversations, being okay with the fact that maybe that person is not right for you, or maybe that property is not the best fit, confidence that you will have more. And is that something that kind of changes over time? You said at the beginning you were taking on any property that you could imagine, but in hindsight, is that kind of like a maturity that a vacation rental manager goes through, do you think?
It's so different in every market, but I can say I made that decision within the first year, because I saw really quickly if I could stick by a set of parameters that I believed would make the company successful, that ultimately it was going to be a lot easier along the way to end up with 130 luxury ski and ski out properties in specific areas like Big Sky Resort and Moonlight Basin. And it was tough to do, but I can say over the years, I honestly said no to way more properties than yes, which I'm sure is shocking to a lot of people. But this also helped us create the brand that we have now. And it also honestly created referrals for similar properties and like-minded owners, because people could see how their property might fit just like their friend's property fit. And we did this all without ever soliciting property owners, and never did a single direct mail or targeted email campaign.
Wow. You should really consider folders, pamphlets.
Well, when I started, Matt, I used Outlook folders or I'm sorry, Outlook calendars and paper folders to organize reservations. I didn't have a PMS system.
Oh, nice. When you said 130 properties, was that something of a sweet spot? This season of Unlocked is themed magic zones, the sweet spots or spaces that vacation rental managers can find themselves in, which they've got enough of quality and consistency that they're happy and they're able to spend time with family. Was that 130 count something that you knew from the beginning because you calculated it out, or what?
Actually, no. And this would be in the hindsight lessons of when I think about how I would do things differently. I think I would have put more boundaries on what would be okay for my personal life and what would not, and also what would be enough versus the continual drive to, you know, have more. And I'm not saying that was the motivator. We actually um, found that the tipping point for where operations got a lot more difficult was around 55 properties is where we really felt it change, and where I really needed to increase staffing and the level of expertise within the organization. Um, and then we, for quite some time, held at right around 100 properties, more or less. We said we represented Big Sky's top 100 luxury properties. And, you know, that strategy, I think we would have been fine with that. That for us was a great number, and a number, in this market that somebody could be very successful with. So, retrospect lesson is I like your idea. Define what is enough, and have a personal life outside of just your work life.
Yeah, this phrase upper boundaries. is one that I like because, you know, if you're only focusing on growing, scaling, like we've talked about, eventually your best becomes a little bit compromised. Your properties aren't all equally amazing. Eventually, you're not able to do the things that made you different to begin with. And you kind of like lose any of the leverage, the traction that you originally had. And for most of us, it was and still should be a lifestyle business. And if you're not sort of etching out maybe what personal time looks like, you're very easily going to run right through it because you don't have any boss. You don't have anyone telling you you should really take a break. What would be an example of like a personal thing in hindsight that you would have like drawn the line at, a personal moment?
Well, I think because I cared so much, I was always just willing to cross over the line of, I'm doing something personal with my family and I got a text or an email from a homeowner. And rather than kind of box my work and my personal a little separate, I allowed some of that to invade into my space. And in retrospect, all the reasons that I originally came to Big Sky and the things that I loved about Big Sky, I saw that I had made some compromises on. And it wasn't that we still weren't enjoying being here and doing these things we love, but I can tell that I let my business to some extent run me versus running my business and having a plan. And that was just something because it evolved so quickly and so organically. Um, it never was a thought in my mind at the time.
Part of that process is taking advantage of tools at our disposal, which are better and more powerful today than ever before. What kinds of categories of tools stand out to you as like could not have done it without X?
Well, definitely, I went until 2013. So remember, 2009 was really the start with 4 properties. And, I think in year 2, it might have been 11, and then it went to 20 and 32. And at about the point we got to 30, I still didn't have a PMS system. So that was pretty revolutionary, was having a system that I could automate CRM letters to guests and to have some systems in place. That definitely, I don't think I could have gone any further without that. As time went on, it became more communication tools within the team itself. So utilizing things like Slack or Breezeway, to track work orders and to have systems in place. Definitely technology tools, Ring Central or any kind of, it wouldn't have to be that, but a phone system that allowed us to forward to different people's cell phones. There were tools like that. Looking back, we never would have been able to continue to move forward without execution on using those tools.
And now a word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Point Central, the leaders in smart home automation. And instead of me telling you how great I think they are, or reading off of some kind of script that Andy or Sean sent me, here's one of the industry's most influential technology experts, Terry White, when I asked him why Point Central is such a game changer.
I use them, so I know the product pretty well. I would say their customer service is outstanding, but what they provide is, remote locks, thermostat, door and window sensors, light control, leak detection. It's pretty hard to beat. But when I was looking and I was demoing all these products because I was looking for the solution for myself, I had access to someone who used to work at Point Central, and he was probably very highly rated in the industry, had a great reputation. And so I had access to him. So I approached him. I said, I'm demoing all these companies, doing all this stuff. He says, you can demo every company that you want. He says, but I'll tell you right now, you're going to end up at Point Central. And so that's exactly what happened to outstanding company for sure.
I could not have said it any better myself. Point Central is now accepting property managers with less than 25 properties, which gives all of us the excuse to get a little more connected. Head over to pointcentral.com/VRMB to learn more. and Breezeway, a property care and automation platform that solves the challenges of ensuring clean, safe, and high-quality properties in the wake of the pandemic. And instead of hyping Breezeway myself, here's Christina Thorensen of Chattanooga Vacation Rentals when I asked her what's the single technology shift that she considers most important to her business.
I think there are some folks on the property care housekeeping side that are doing some really cool stuff with confirming sanitization and disinfecting of properties. That I think where we're going to see technology with every housekeeper has a cell phone and they're checking into their system and checking out when they're done. They are taking pictures of the chemicals they're using and the spaces they've cleaned. And I think that is a technology shift. That's something that the guest might be able to access directly moving forward.
I like that. Let's give a shout out. Who are you talking about right now?
Well, I see Jeremiah Gall and Breezeway does some really cool stuff with that. You know, they're trying to do some things where they're incorporating that tech that's already available in the smartphone to help increase the guest's level of comfort, which I think is good.
I couldn't have said that any better myself. Head over to breezeway.io/VRMB, where you can do a free demo and secure free implementation if you decide to sign on. That's roughly a $1,000 value. That's breezeway.io/VRMB. Now let's get back to the show. You are self-admittedly not a techie person. How do you psych yourself up to accept a new technology to run your business that you've previously been doing by hand?
Yeah, well, luckily I am not afraid of change. That's the positive side. I said to Matt, I mean, I didn't even tell you this, Matt. I was working on some notes for this, and I was just typing them into an email. And about an hour later, something happened. It glitches, and I lose everything, right? And I was so mad. And my husband just looked at me and said, "When are you ever going to learn? Why didn't you open a Word document and type it in a Word document where it would autosave?" That's how bad I am. But on the flip side, I know my limitations, and I am always willing to listen to other people and their ideas. And there's been a lot of fantastic people in our organization over the years who said, "I think we can do this better. I think we can do this more efficiently." And I don't have a problem with the change aspect. I just probably wasn't the one you were going to want executing the tool itself.
I like that. I could tell you were a big preparer. You definitely put more prep into this interview than any guest in history. You provided me with a complete outline of synthesized lessons. So I appreciate that. I'm sorry to hear that it was actually the original draft was ditched. But we've talked about kind of finding this sweet spot. We've talked about focusing on being the absolute best at your niche. We've talked about carving a niche, being different from other vacation rentals in the area and scaling a little bit. You ended up eventually having some competition, right? Some of the larger vacation rental management companies came to this area, if I'm not mistaken. And what did all of your work up until then afford you? Like, what positioning did it give you when competing with companies that could spend way more than you on advertising, let's say?
Yeah, and this is probably one of my hindsight lessons for people now that I have sold the company, is really thinking about, at the point you get to an exit, who do you want that partner to be? And I knew, over the years, there was a lot of opportunities that came our way, and I won't say their names, but they're all names that you guys would recognize. And that was really tough for me to think about taking what I considered to be my baby that I had developed from day one, from one property, and turning it over to a national company. For me was really difficult. All my competitors were doing that. And starting in about 2016, I think the first acquisition in Big Sky was made. And there's subsequently been 4 pretty big acquisitions since with national brands. And I just knew that our tagline has always been, we live here, we play here, we know Big Sky. And the local connection and being the authentic local authority, that we knew where the crock pot was in the house. We knew everything about that particular property. And, the team had been in those properties. We could tell people our personal favorite restaurant. All of those things made it really difficult for me to just only look at the money element of a sale. And so that would be one thing, before you get in that position of having people making offers and or thinking about selling, just thinking about who you want that partner to be in the end. To answer your question though, you said what allowed us to kind of hold on through all of that.
Yeah. Like how did you react? What was the impact?
This is kind of a crazy thing. I hope I don't make myself look bad here, but I'm going to let a little dirty secret out of the bag, which is I don't like vacation rentals. But now I'm going to explain.
With an asterisk.
So for me, what I mean by that is I only get a few vacations a year, and those experiences are precious to me. I want something that has some meaning and that I have a great experience in the location that I've chosen. And so I always knew that if I picked a branded experience, for example, a resort or a branded hotel, that I kind of knew what I was going to be expecting and what my expectation was going to be in the location I'd worked so hard to figure out. And I found in the early days that staying in vacation rentals could just vary in a crazy way. Everything from my host might be just average. The property might have been oversold. The pictures were way better than the property itself. The housekeeping could be terrible. My pool might be broken. The list was pretty endless. So for me, when I set out in this world of vacation rentals, my dislike of that inconsistent experience drove my decision to create standards within everything we did, and to not standardize in a cookie cutter, boring kind of way, but rather to allow our guests to know that regardless of the property they chose and how unique that set of amenities and views and everything else might be, that they could expect some minimum standards from the company. And I really think that helped us, as all these other companies came in and tried to figure out, what they were going to be and what they were going to look like. We were already well down that path. And also we could capitalize on our localness in the community. And those were huge differentiators for us.
Did you feel the entrance of those large companies on your bookings and your bottom line?
We never did.
That's awesome.
We've consistently seen high single digit, low double digit revenue growth over all the years that I've, was running the company. And I think we just stood firm on who we were and the type of experience we were providing, and making sure our owners knew what was important to us and our guests did. And we really never, if anything, people were frustrated with some of the experiences they had in those first years, and we gained them, as loyal customers from experiences that were less than what they were looking for.
And so what do you say to a vacation rental owner or manager who says these companies who will not be named, like Vacasa or Natural Retreats, are stealing our competition? They're unfair competition. We can't afford to compete with them. What do you say to them?
Well, that's a tough one, Matt, because so many markets are different, right? If I'm in Orlando, Florida, or I'm in San Diego, the competition for being seen on the internet from Google searches and all of those things becomes much more challenging. So I would say it's really important in those environments to come up with, and I think this was your thing, your 10X. Did you call it your 10X at one of your presentations?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. So an idea or something that makes you stand out and drives people, to you organically. I mean, we've done everything from webcams.
Oh, I love that, by the way. That webcam, that's genius, by the way. Explain real quickly what that is.
We have a webcam at our office, and we've actually, talked about moving maybe to a property location or whatnot. But just so people can see, what from our office, what does the weather look like today? Is it snowing? Is it not? And over the years, we've done some things like ski in, ski out videos from properties that were, really cool and were something that, set us apart. I would have liked to be able to use them in a much more marketing type way, but, just because of some issues of where they were filmed and whatnot, we had to be careful with that. But there's always a way to come up with something creative. We always have tried to be innovators and push have our competition copying us versus the other way around. And so I don't know, your question is tough, because if I was in a market where there's 200 other vacation rental companies and these guys can spend the most money, then I'm going to work really hard on making sure that the people that are coming and staying in my properties are having a top level experience, and that I'm staying in touch with them and working to get them to spread the word, because I think that's so important. So you're not having to go out and find that new customer all the time.
Would Pelotons in the vacation homes fit into that bucket of doing things new and different?
Yes, of course. We knew during the pandemic that people got addicted to their Pelotons, right? So why not try to come up with a set of properties that had Pelotons as a feature? So that, that's a great example of the kind of things that we've done over the years, just pushing the envelope and making people nip at our heels to try to figure out what we're going to do next.
I'd like to move into this kind of third stage of your business, and that is the exit, or that is selling it. But I also wanted to just touch on, did you have a plan to sell this business from the start? Like, was this done from the very beginning, or was there a moment in which you said to yourself, oh, one day we may choose to not do this anymore and sell our baby?
I think, everyone knows who's been a vacation rental manager for a period of time, maybe over 5 years, maybe it's over 10 years, that of course at some point you probably think, what would it be like to not own this? And how would that be different? What would my life look like without that? So I can't say that it was conscious. We didn't set out to build something with the end goal being selling it. And again, one of my hindsight lessons probably would be to think about that a little bit more. Is that going to be part of your strategy? Is that going to be something that 5 years from now you would consider doing? Because how you approach your business and the decisions you make along the way will end up being one of the determining factors in the actual value in a sale. And so we did a lot of things organically just because they were the right thing to do and because they were a good idea, or it was how we could treat somebody right. But I probably would have thought that through a little bit better.
When you say components that can add to the value of your business, are you talking about things like the value of the brand beyond just the amount of revenue that it's generating?
Yeah, because of course, in our world, what somebody is really purchasing is goodwill and reputation and the relationships or the contracts you have with the owners in the portfolio. Sometimes you're selling real estate, you own your building, or, you have vehicles and equipment. But in reality, the bulk of the transaction consists on the value of the reputation that you've created.
And did you have multiple people approach you, or was this just like a completely random thing that happened?
Yeah, I mean, over the years, we definitely, like I said, this has been a market that has garnered a lot of interest and it's a very up and coming area of the country in terms of just interest in the real estate and other aspects of Big Sky. So there certainly have been a lot of people interested. I think we didn't really plan on this timing, but it goes back to the what I touched on earlier, which is, who do you want your partner to be in the end? And when a partner came along that owned just one other vacation rental company in what they considered to be a complementary market, where they could tie the two together and have some synergies in operations, maybe utilizing in their off season some of their reservation agents during our busy season and vice versa. And, being able to take best practices from one or the other companies and blend those things. When that opportunity came along, and it was an opportunity to leave all our employees in place and leave the brand as it is in the community, that was attractive. And so again, in retrospect, maybe I would advise people to spend a little bit more time really knowing the value of what you have, and planning in the event that something did come your way. Would you know how much your company is worth, and what would have what it would take to say yes to an opportunity, because things happen pretty quickly, and I hadn't maybe given pause as much as I could have to those questions. And so I would just advise people, if you have an exit strategy in mind, I think, working with people who can advise you on the value of your business and knowing the financial side of your business really well is helpful.
And I would love to just give a little shout out to two individuals that always take really good care of VRMB listeners. Jacoby and his father, Jim Olin of C2G Advisors, as well as Ben Edwards. They'll just hop on the phone with you, ask you some important questions, give you an idea of what your business is worth, give you an idea if there's a demand for that kind of business, because there are lots of managers looking to buy other management companies. But one of those pillars there, one of the factors is the profit that your business is making. And I was hoping you could share a little bit about this lesson of focusing on a singular market and this multiple income stream that for you acted as kind of like it unlocked you see what I did there? It unlocked well, yeah, I have been waiting the entire conversation to try that. Clearly failed. Talk to us about the focus on that and the multiple income stream.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot of interest from vacation rental managers in developing a variety of different income streams. I really did one thing, and I stayed in my lane. And I've said that over and over, and I think it actually it really contributed to our success in this market. I could have done HOA management. I could have done long-term rentals. I could have sold real estate, but I chose not to. I chose to only work in a referral capacity for real estate. I really stayed in one area, honing my expertise on nightly rentals and knowing everything I could to be the expert in our geographic area on nightly rentals in the luxury market. And so, for me, every time I tried to go off that course and do things that I thought were good ideas, everything from, we're going to have a complimentary guest shuttle van to drive them to the ski slopes for those houses that aren't ski in, ski out. Every time I tried one of these things that I thought would drive more rentals or create more success, I always ended up honestly going right back to just make the bell in the office ring more often. If the agents, they have some fun different things, cowbells or dingling bells, whatnot, when they book somebody into the perfect property. And
oh, nice.
Honestly, I learned over all these years that was where the revenue stream came from. It was by booking more vacations. It wasn't in all of my ideas that, were multiple income streams.
Some of those income streams with other companies can be tours. It can be, laundry facilities. It can be maintenance services that are offered to other owners or managers. It can be like a variety of different sort of diversified income streams, but each of those streams takes a little bit of the focus away from the core.
Right. And there, I mean, so many people are successful at that. One of my good friends in Charlottesville is a master at the spider web.
Let's give him a shout out. Shout out time.
Shout out to him. But I just found for me that wasn't the strategy I chose, and I just decided I was going to be the guru of nightly rentals, and that was, what I was going to focus on is how revenue management strategies and strategies to stay in certain developments within Big Sky that we felt we could be successful with. And so by working on the things that really continued to create that year over year revenue growth, we ultimately created more value from a buyer's perspective.
Are these the three things that you kind of think were really worth investing in? Revenue management, the direct booking campaign, and the geographical focus?
Yeah, I think those are three great things to focus on. If producing a high level of revenue is important to you, I think those three things have a big impact.
And this is kind of my last question, and it exits to community, which is one of my favorite words. What have you learned over all these years? You've started in the industry with zero experience after a very successful career on Broadway. You built a successful vacation rental management company, and at its peak, how many properties did you sell at?
130.
130, still that perfect sweet spot. And you found that that time to sell and a company that was a good fit and that was willing to offer you something that you could get excited about. What is the role in hindsight of a vacation rental property and or its proprietor in any local community, and specifically yours?
For us, there's been some things we've been really proud of, and the pieces that I look back and am most proud of, we've often been able to employ 40 or more people in our local community. And this is a community that struggles mightily with affordable housing. We have, most likely around 5,000 people making the turn into Big Sky every day to be able to come to work. And we've been proud over the years that the majority of the people that have worked for the company have actually been living right here in the local community because we've been able to pay a high enough wage and provide benefits that allowed them to do that. I think it's a responsibility of our company and other companies like us to be involved in local organizations like the Food Bank or the Gallatin River Task Force and organizations that are making this a better place for people to live. And my hindsight, or what I would do a little differently now, is I definitely would have partnered in a more intense way with some of those organizations and actually promoted them within the guest experience, allowing people different ways to get involved and to give to those organizations. We did, last year or the year before, we left bags in each unit for non-perishables for people to, load all of the things that they didn't end up consuming during their vacation, and then dropping those at a local food bank. But I think there's so many ways and so many important organizations within each community, so finding ways that you can tie into those, I think is really important. Just support of local vendors. Even we made it very high priority that we would just pay vendors immediately. This is a challenge in our community to get people to even show up to repair an appliance or to, fix a breaker. And so by developing relationships with all of our local vendors and really treating them right and paying them the second that an invoice was presented, that's just different than how a big national company is going to approach those relationships. So I think, those are all things that were meaningful and I feel great about in terms of our involvement.
And I love how that kind of weaves back into the differentiation part of being different than a large corporation. You are on site. You do have a full vested presence. And one of the biggest things that I have concluded over the past 10 years or so with regards to community involvement is that it's not just a nice sounding thing. You can't be sustainable. You can't assume that your community is going to take care of you, whether that's with guests that are a little bit out of control or support when it comes to regulation, you can't assume that the community is going to be there to support unless you are contributing. And I've just seen two very, very different cycles that people can fall into. The first is doing all of these things to some extent so that when the adversity hits, when you have that special need, there are people that are there for you because you've put in the man or the woman hours and you've been present. The opposite is not doing those things. And in turn, the destination begins kind of eating away at your guests because no longer is it a fun place to be a vacation rental visitor. So I'm so with you that if some element of support and contribution to the local community is baked into the business from the very start, it affords you the chance to last. I mean, you get to kind of make those decisions your way as opposed to uncomfortable crises, right?
Yeah, and I'll give a shout out to a local business here that I think some of these things could easily be incorporated into vacation rentals. But Big Sky Build, the owner of that business, is super involved in all kinds of community efforts and does things like allowing his employees they each get a month. I think he probably draws names out of a hat for an employee, and they get to choose a local charity to donate $500 to each month. And, that always comes out on, what that employee has chosen on social media. And he's just rallied a lot of support. There's always like, hey, thanks so much for supporting the community and good effort. And just, he does it so consistently and so authentically. It's not just for social media recognition. And he does it in a variety of ways, from offering helmets to any kid who can't afford a ski helmet in the community, anonymously. Like, it's not a big deal. They just can say, I need this. No one knows who it is. Constant efforts and that on that path. Again, because I'm trying to give some hindsight lessons too. Going back to the beginning, I would have really thought that through, what I was passionate about and what efforts in the community I really wanted to get behind, and would have done that consistently and authentically over the 11 years. Because I think it just means so much to the community.
I'm going to channel my Sarah Bradford and Tim Cafferty podcast and throw you one last quick fire round, but it's only going to consist of one question. What are you going to do next? And don't say going to Disney World.
No, I know exactly what I'm doing next. I have a camper van on order that is arriving in March. And my husband and I, as we get a little bit more time, we still do have one student who we have a senior in high school and a sophomore in high school. But in between things, we're going to travel all over Montana to different little communities that we haven't had a chance to visit. And, with the larger goal of getting around the United States. So hopefully I'll be able to come see some of the people who are listening in your own communities and find out what's so special about each of those places.
So would it be fair to say this is a new chapter, a new age of the King family?
It has always been something we've loved to do. And living here, there's so many amazing places to camp and hike and kayak and everything else. But yes, it will be definitely much more time than we've been able to spend doing it. And my husband, you'll find him on the rivers much more than in the past.
And golf courses as well, or is he done with that?
No, he likes to golf, but fly fishing is definitely more of a passion for him. And, there's so many incredible rivers around here. So that's where you'll find him.
Okay, beautiful. Well, hopefully, Kirsten, we'll get to see you as conferences begin back. I know that you're not going to be there doing your same learning that you used to, but hopefully we will get to hang out sometime soon. I wanted to officially congratulate you because you have passed through vacation rental life journey so successfully. And I wanted to also thank you for sharing all of this wisdom, because I think people will really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, so much for allowing me this time. I've always admired so much of what you've been creating over these years and the community that you've built. So I appreciate being part of it.
The feeling is mutual. Have a wonderful week.
Well, you too. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to today's interview. If you'd like to download a full transcript of this conversation, along with links to resources that we mentioned, and perhaps collaborate with our guest, each of whom are members of VRMB communities, head over to community.vrmb.com and click register. Our community is for folks who don't want to do it the hard way or alone. They want to use the path of least resistance. No reinventing the wheel here, just copying the best practices to vacation rental growth that are out there. We like to think that we have the most creative vacation rental professionals in the world, all under one virtual roof. That's community.vrmb.com/register.